Let's read Yoko Yak's Yakety Yakking. Yoko Yak yanked back the covers and bounced out of bed. She had so much to tell her friends about her adventure yesterday. Yodel-odel-odel, Yoko sang in the shower. Yay for school today, Yoko chanted as she dressed. Mama Yak called to Yoko. Are you ready for breakfast? Yip, yap, yap, Yoko yelled back. Yogurt's yum, yum, yummy in my tummy, Yoko chanted as she ate. Don't talk with your mouth full, Yoko, said Papa Yak. Don't talk, period, please, said Yoko's younger sister, Yolanda. You're always yakety yakking. I am not, Yoko yelped. Yoko zipped into the yard at Alphabetty's school. Yo, Polly, she yelled. Yo, Sammy. Yo, Bobby. I went kayaking yesterday. Alphabetty rang the bell. She smiled at Yoko. We all want to hear about your kayak adventure. Today is a very busy day, but tomorrow afternoon we'll have sharing time. You can tell us about your trip then. But Yoko couldn't wait. She started telling Polly Porcupine about the kayak trip during math. We kayaked down Coyote Canyon, said Yoko. Shh, whispered Polly. We're supposed to be doing math. During silent reading time, Yoko started telling Sammy Skunk about the kayak trip. Sammy put his finger up to his lips. We're supposed to be reading silently. Next, it was time for art. Alphabetty smiled at Yoko. Can you draw a picture of your kayak trip? Okay, said Yoko. But Yoko also wanted to talk about her kayak trip. She started whispering to Bobby Baboon. Bobby put a hand over his ear. I can't think when you're yakking in my ear, Yoko. You're a very yakety yak today. Yoko burst into tears. Alphabetty hurried back to Yoko's desk. Bobby called me a yakety yak, Yoko yowled. Bobby said, I'm sorry, Yoko. I do want to hear about your kayak trip, but not right now. Alphabetty whispered to Yoko, tell us about your trip with your drawing, and if you could be a quiet little yak during class time, you may talk first during sharing time tomorrow. The next morning, Yoko was early for breakfast. She was wearing her Coyote Canyon t-shirt. She was holding her Coyote Canyon yo-yo, and she was absolutely quiet. Yolanda looked at Yoko. Then she looked at Papa. What's wrong with Yoko? She's not yakking. Yoko dipped her toast in egg yolk and popped it in her mouth. She smiled at Yolanda as she chewed, with her mouth shut. When Yoko arrived at school, she smiled and waved at her friends. She smiled and waved at Alphabetty. Yoko waited for math to begin. She was very quiet. Are you okay? Asked Polly Porcupine. Yoko nodded yes and said nothing. During reading, Yoko was also very quiet. Are you okay? Asked Sammy Skunk. Yoko nodded yes and said nothing. When it was time for art, Yoko was still very quiet. Are you okay? Asked Bobby Baboon. Yoko nodded yes and said nothing. Finally, it was sharing time. Alphabetty announced, Yoko, you may go first. Yoko ran to the front of the classroom. She smiled and she said, nothing. She showed everyone her 2 drawings of kayaks. She pointed to her yellow Coyote Canyon t-shirt. she demonstrated her yellow Coyote Canyon yo-yo, all without saying a word. The class began laughing and chanting, "Yakety yak, please come back! Yakety yak, please come back!" Yoko Yak laughed too, and then she began to talk. "My kayak bounced over waves. I was soaked by water spray, and when I yelled, it echoed in Coyote Canyon. But I can be a quiet yak as well as a yakety yak, and I made up a yodel about it last night." "Yodel for us, Yoko!" yelled the class. First, Yoko whispered, "Oh, a yakety yak can be quiet as quiet can be. A yodel, odel, odel, and a yip, yip, yippee." And then Yoko chanted loudly, "And a yakety yak can yodel, a yakety yak can yak, a yodel, odel, odel, and a yak, yak, yak." "Yay for you, Yoko Yak!" cried Alphabetty. "You proved you can be a quiet yak." "And a clever yak," said Polly. "And a funny yak," said Sammy. "And a yodeling yak," laughed Bobby. And everyone cheered, "Yay for Yoko Yak!" And everyone did the yakety yak yodel. The end. Thank you for reading with me.